Let's bring in John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and former law clerk to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, now a UC Berkeley law professor, and Tom Dupree, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, are joining us now. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. So just your initial reaction to this news, this decision from the Supreme Court to do things in the way that they are normally done, which is to allow the appeals court to do its thing on this before they take it on. They're not going to expedite it, which is what Jack Smith wanted. John Yoo, let me get your reaction first.
Well, Christmas came 2 days early for Donald Trump. This is nothing, you can't say this is anything but a victory for him and a defeat for the special counsel. This means, I think in all likelihood, this criminal trial is going to get pushed back into the summer, won't be able to start until this immunity issue is handled. And the Supreme Court has granted a second case that involves the January 6 protesters that allows it to review the legality of 2 of the 4 charges against Trump in this criminal proceeding, which could push the trial even farther, maybe past the November elections.
You know, Tom, I think that for a lot of us watching all of these cases, which you have watched very closely as well, there has always been quite a few legal avenues for the Trump team to push to delay a lot of this potentially beyond the election. What's your take on what we heard today, and what does it mean for Jack Smith and the way that he's going to carry out this case moving forward?
I agree that this is a win today for the Trump legal defense team and a defeat for the special counsel. But keep in mind that what the special counsel was asking the Supreme Court to do was somewhat extraordinary, basically leapfrog the Court of Appeals and proceed directly to the Supreme Court. And just because the special counsel wanted the Supreme Court to decide this issue on a super fast, expedited basis doesn't mean that the justices have agreed to do so. And today we learned they don't agree to do so. Interestingly, there were no noted dissents from the order, so it looks as though the Supreme Court unanimously said to the special counsel, don't come knocking on our door right now. We're going to let this process play out like it would in any other normal case of having a Court of Appeals decide the case before the Supreme Court decides whether it wants to get involved.
You know, Kim Strassel wrote a piece, John Yoo, today before this decision came out, and in it she says, meet the biggest, baddest new power broker for the 2024 presidential contest, an unelected and unenthusiastic U.S. Supreme Court. There's a much easier way for all involved to settle the nation's political disputes. It's called an election. Let's have one and live with the results. How much do you think that that sentiment is weighing on the court right now? The last time they were this deeply involved was in 2000. It's not a position that the court really wants to be in, right?
Yeah, I come to this as someone who clerked at the Supreme Court. I also clerked at the D.C. Circuit, which is going to hear this immunity issue now in the regular course. And watching the court for the last 30 years as a professor, this is a court that does not want to pick the winner of the 2024 election. The last thing they want to do is get involved again, and get, as they did in 2000, Bush versus Gore, and get partisan retaliation, pushback, attacks, which they're already getting even before these cases get to the court. Instead, it's been people who have been conjuring up novel, unprecedented theories like this disqualification of the president under the 14th Amendment out of Colorado, like prosecuting for the very first time a former president. They've been trying to use the courts to try to get Trump off the ballot. Now, what I think the Supreme Court is going to do is say, let's just keep the choice of Trump. Let the people decide what to think about Trump on January 6th. So they can do that here by letting the trial, the criminal trial, actually go past the election. They can do this here by reversing the Colorado Supreme Court and letting Trump go on the ballot throughout the country. And then the justices won't be picking who wins the 2024 election.
But, you know, let me bring in Andy McCarthy here, former assistant U.S. attorney, joining us as well today, Fox News contributor. Andy, thank you very much for being here. As you warm up with your initial reaction to this, I just want to put this poll up. This is a poll of the confidence in the country in the Supreme Court. This one is back from the summer. It's a June poll, 2023. It's the most recent one that we have on this question. But look at this move. In 2017, 83% said they had confidence in the Supreme Court. Now that number is at 48%. So they have a lot on their plate in terms of how they're perceived, a lot of people who are questioning many of the institutions in the U.S. government these days, Andy. So what do you make of their decision in this regard?
Well, I would just echo what John just said. They don't want to be the ones in the position of deciding the election. And they already know, Martha, I think, that it's highly, highly likely that they're going to be throwing out the Colorado decision, in short order. I think that's on a timetable where it really has to be done by early January. They don't want to be in a position, I mean, they're going to throw that out because it deserves to be thrown out, but they don't want to be in a position where, they rule for Trump on that case, and then, this case comes up and they decide to take it, and they look like they're trying to push their way in when actually the last thing they want is to be in. I also think that, in a way, I believe that they're kind of saving Smith from himself. I thought it was foolish on his part to seek an expedited appeal. The court was almost certainly going to want the benefit of the D.C. Circuit's views on this. The D.C. Circuit agreed to hear the case on an expedited basis. I think the briefs are due like the New Year's Day, and then they're, they'll probably schedule argument very shortly after that, if they haven't already. So he's very likely to win in that court. And then the Supreme Court can say, we're going to let that decision stand. And, if after Trump goes through the whole process, there's an eventual appeal, then we can hear immunity and everything else then. So I thought that was the best route for Smith. I just think it was foolish for him to seek expedited appeal. And I know this seems like a win for Trump because he wants to drag things out. I don't know if he's going to get them dragged out this way.
It's fascinating. I mean, all along in these cases, there has been a lot of, coming from the three of you and other people that we speak with, a lot of concern that these cases were not likely to hold up, and that in many cases they could be pushed beyond the election. And we're seeing some of that play out right now, despite the fact that there's a whole other half of the country that seems to think that he can be indicted and convicted on some of these issues without even going to court and removed from ballots as well, just based on their very strong hunch that he must be guilty. So that's not the way things have worked in the past. Tom and Andy and John, thank you very much, gentlemen. Wonderful to have you with us today.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.